For the bezeled pendant, start with a Pardo silver clay strip about 1 to 1.5 inches wide and 5 to 6 inches long on a medium thin setting on the machine. I used a 5 on a Makins. Use a texture sponge on it. If you don't have a texture sponge, you can use cheesecloth. Using your rigid blade, cut 1 or 2 for backup, 5 mm wide strip of silver clay. Rub the edge of the pendant with bacon bond. Place the pendant on a piece of wax paper so that you won't have to handle it to put it on the baking tile. Cut one end of the silver strip in a diagonal. Start placing the strip around the pendant with the short end side facing outwards. Gently prod the clay to bend and follow the shape of the pendant. When you reach the end where the two ends meet, overlap the first end with the second end and give it a very gently push down. Lift the second end and turn it upside down. You will see a line left by the edge of the first end. Cut along that line. Then finish lining the pendant with a bezel. The two ends will fit together perfectly. Use your rigid blade's blunt side to push the bezel against the pendant so that it will be perfectly adhered with no separation spots. To make the joint of the two ends blend perfectly, simply use your finger to feather the upper layer of clay, then use the texture sponge over the area. You can also use again the texture sponge if there are areas that have been flattened by manipulating the clay. I am using a popsicle stick to make sure the texture goes all the way to the inner edge of the bezel. Use gold perfect pearls over the bezel, then use a wash of burnt umber acrylic paint to create a bit of patina. Let the acrylic wash dry thoroughly before baking. Bake for 30 minutes at 275 degrees Fahrenheit. After your pendant is baked and cooled, apply UV resin over the surface of the cabochon, making sure you pull the resin with a toothpick all the way to the edge of the cabochon. Optional, you can use some inclusions. I used here real miniature dried starfish as the Mokume gane looks like swirling water, but you can use any other inclusions. Make sure to push the inclusions at the very bottom of the UV resin, flush on the clay, and make sure they are covered with UV resin. Cure the UV resin. Once the resin is cured, prepare a sheet of the Pardo silver at a thickness about 3 settings lower than the thinnest setting on your machine. Rub bacon bond on the back of the pendant. Set aside. Use the texturing sponge on the sheet of silver clay. Place the sheet textured side down and place the pendant face up on the silver sheet. Make sure you didn't trap any air pockets. Then fold the clay over the edges of the bezel. Use your roller over the raw clay over the edges. That way, by simply gently pulling on the clay afterwards, you will see that the extra clay comes off right at the edge in a very clean cut. Nevertheless, check the edges, and if there is any remnant of extra clay, use your X-Acto knife to trim it off. Place the pendant face down on the wax paper and treat it the same way you did the bezel. First apply gold perfect pearls, then a wash of burnt sienna acrylic for a mild patina. Allow to dry completely. Run again your silver clay through the machine, one setting before the thinnest setting, to obtain a strip of clay about 1 inch wide and 6 inch long. Using your rigid blade, cut 2 strips, one about 1 millimeter wide and the other about 1.5 millimeters wide. Gently rub white pearl perfect pearls on both strips. Using a toothpick, place some bacon bond on the edge of the cabochon. Place the thinnest strip of silver clay on the edge of the cabochon, running vertically on the edge, the way the metal setting of a gemstone cabochon would be. Use a sculpting tool or the blunt edge of your X-Acto knife to make sure the setting is flush on the cabochon. Then use the roller to create a small bevel resting directly on the resin part of the cabochon. Use the X-Acto knife to make any necessary trims to adjust the line of the clay setting of the cabochon. Run a strip of Pardo gold on the thinnest manageable setting on your machine. Then cut 1 mm wide strips. Using your toothpick again, place some bacon bond right on the outside of the silver setting. Place the gold strips around the silver setting, flat on the main bezel. Use a sculpting tool to make sure the strip is even all around and flush with the silver clay. Final faux metal embellishment. Rub bacon bond along the edge of the bezel. Then place the second silver strip of clay flush on the edge of the bezel. Use your roller very gently to make sure the strip is perfectly aligned on the edge. Use a fine paintbrush to add a bit of gold perfect pearls to the gold strip around the cabochon, and optional, a bit more of the white pearl perfect pearls on the silver strip on the very edge of the pendant. Place between tiles and wax paper as shown. Bake for 45 minutes at 275 Fahrenheit. If your pendant warped at all after placing resin on it, now it is the time to straighten it up. This pendant requires only a pinch bail. Decide which corner of the pendant you want to be up. Use a gold-colored pinch bail. First, measure where the pins of the bail would be. Use a hand drill to pre-drill holes about 1 mm deep. Using your long nose pliers, open slowly the pinch bail to avoid it breaking. Place the pins in the pre-drilled holes and use again the pliers to tighten the bail. Even if it is a bit larger, at least I made it a bit larger for purposes of demonstrating how to make it, it is a quite elegant pendant and can be worn on a simple metal chain.